Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and today we're going to be talking about aliens, more specifically extraterrestrial intelligence. In this video we're going to be focusing on one study that was recently released by a very interesting individual, this person right here, James Benford, who also has a twin brother, Gregory, with whom he's released a lot of different studies and a lot of different books as well, focusing on looking for extraterrestrial intelligence. And more specifically looking for, I guess you can call them aliens, using various scientific techniques and also using his expertise in microwave technology. And although it doesn't really mean that he believes in aliens, or it doesn't really mean that he sort of believes in some sort of a conspiracy that aliens are hidden from us, he still doesn't deny the fact that we need to keep looking. Which is why when I saw this paper right here, I decided to talk about it and also give you a chance to read it yourselves. The paper itself is in the description below. So what exactly is he talking about in this paper, and what are these lurkers that he refers to throughout the paper itself? Well, to explain this, you need to understand what we're doing here on Earth. Even though we're sort of still developing our intelligence, we already are sending out a lot of different probes out there, specifically robotic probes like the one you see here on the screen, or more specifically, probes like Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 that are already outside of our solar system and are slowly moving into the interstellar space. And the goal of all of these projects is of course to both explore space, but also to possibly make contact with some sort of a extraterrestrial intelligence, which is why the Voyager probe have this really cool golden disc on the inside with all sorts of information regarding our solar system and humanity. But despite all of the probes and all of the landings we've been able to achieve over the years, we still haven't really located any intelligence, any extraterrestrial intelligence that is. Although when you think about it, an alien species, possibly more advanced than ours, would very likely use similar techniques to try to locate someone else out there. And so this is kind of how the brothers James and Gregory approach this idea, and this is how they think about aliens in general. So if there is an alien species out there trying to do the same as us, trying to find some sort of another alien species out there and essentially make contact and possibly make friends, they would very likely use similar techniques. First of all, they would very likely send out signals, and today there's even a term named after these brothers, known as Benford beacons, and this refers to the idea that if you were to try to send any kind of a communication to someone out there listening, just because it's so difficult and so power intensive, you would only do so using very short bursts of energy at a very specific frequency, possibly between 1 to 10 gigahertz, and in different directions, hoping that someone will intercept them. But because this task requires so much power and so much energy, it's unlikely that these signals would be repeated too many times. And so these beacons could be potentially detected if we were to look all across the night skies at all times, but catching them would be pure luck. And humanity has actually sent these beacons in various locations as well, and all of the ones we've sent so far are here on the list on Wikipedia, but none of them have reached their final destinations yet. But in this paper he's not really talking about the beacons as much as the actual probes. What if the aliens have already discovered us, and what if they actually are listening and sort of secretly observing us? In other words, what if at least one conspiracy theory regarding aliens is sort of correct? What if the aliens are already here? The most logical explanation, according to James Benford, is that they would very likely hide their probes somewhere nearby, somewhere where we wouldn't really be able to locate them too easily, while at the same time still have a good enough spot to observe Earth and have resources for, I guess, providing energy to the probe itself. In other words, he suggests that these probes must be robotic, they must have a good observational spot, and they have to have some sort of a resource nearby to be able to, for example, repair itself. And although there are plenty of locations where you could technically place these probes, a lot of them we have already explored and really found nothing there. Like for example, placing something on the surface of the moon would be pretty logical. You get a very good observational spot for pretty much every major location on Earth, and you also can easily transmit signals once you have sunlight, for example, for energy. But we've mapped the moon pretty well. We've also observed the moon in different frequencies, including radio waves, and there's nothing coming out of it, out of some unusual location somewhere on the surface. In other words, if there is a probe here somewhere, it's probably dead and not really responding anymore. And so in that sense, Moon is probably not going to be a spot where we're going to find any robotic probes trying to transmit information. But where could that be? Well, according to James, there are still a few more objects we can consider where, hypothetically, an alien species could place a probe, it would have a very good observational spot, and will very likely never really be able to detect them. In other words, there are a few more spots for these so-called lurkers. And more specifically, he's talking about these so-called quasi-satellites of Earth. Now, we've talked about these previously on the channel, and the most famous one is known as 2016 HO3. Here's actually a list of the ones he thinks we might need to investigate. But the idea for all of these quasi-satellites is pretty simple. These are usually relatively large asteroids with a somewhat peculiar orbit where they do come very close to Earth once in a while, but then they also get to spend a large enough time outside of the Earth system and thus never really be that close, which is why we found most of them completely by accident. The one you see here in Universe Sandbox 2016 HO3 sort of always hovers relatively far from Earth and eventually will actually leave our system, but for now it gets a very good perspective of every angle of our planet. Here you can see that this object always sort of hovers close enough to Earth, never really coming too close and never really leaving the system. And it will probably have this orbit for at least a few more 100 years, escaping our system in about 3 to maybe 400 years. And in this video by NASA, you can clearly see how it orbits around Earth in some sense, but at the same time actually has its own orbit and will eventually most likely go on its own merry way once its orbit destabilizes. But for now, it is a quasi-satellite. It's basically an almost moon of our planet. Which is why, by placing a robotic probe here, the potentially interested in us alien species would always have a chance to look at us from pretty much every direction, still have enough resources to sustain the probe for a very long time, while also having a very good opportunity to use the solar radiation, if they use solar panels, or possibly various other resources available on this asteroid to power their probes. Which is why one of the main conclusions from this paper is that we might want to start listening to radio transmissions from this object and possibly even look at it in all sorts of different frequencies, just to make sure that the aliens are not actually sending signals from there. Now, it's a very long shot, of course, but it obviously doesn't hurt to look there and to see if we do discover something. And luckily, in the next few years, China intends on sending a probe there to try to retrieve a sample of material. And if there is something hiding there, they will probably see it. Although chances are, if they do see it, they might not tell us, because Chinese Space Agency right now is really secretive about everything they do. And so technically, looking for these unusual probes that possibly no longer even function is what James refers to as extraterrestrial archaeology. In other words, discovering these very ancient spacecrafts, kind of like what Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 will turn into one day, moving out there in outer space or possibly sitting still on various objects and waiting for us to discover them. Now, all of this is of course a very long shot. As of today, as of 2019, there really hasn't been any definitive proof of existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. And although the eventual goal of SETI Institute is to discover something out there, in the last few decades of us looking, we unfortunately haven't found anything. There were occasional possible signs, but all of them were pretty quickly disproven. So scientifically speaking, we still haven't found anything, and our chances of finding something eventually are slowly growing dimmer and dimmer. Even though our technology has advanced so much, we haven't really heard anything or seen anything that would definitely say, oh hey, that's aliens. And although nobody is denying the fact that there are a lot of unexplained phenomena out there and a lot of really interesting ideas that we still need to investigate, we're kind of running out of them pretty quickly. But this one here, that involves a quasi-moon and a potentially hidden probe on the surface, is definitely interesting. Because if we were the advanced race trying to look into the lives of a less advanced race, we would probably done the same. Placing a probe somewhere hidden away from the common view, while still being able to zoom in and see what's happening on the planet we're kind of interested in. So in that sense, I'm pretty excited about the upcoming 2024 mission from China, and will hopefully discover something interesting here. But even if we don't, we'll be able to retrieve a sample which will teach us quite a lot about how our solar system formed and how it evolved over time. But anyway, that's it. Check out the paper in the description below, and in the comments below, scientifically speaking, let me know what you think about all of this. Do you think we're alone? Do you think extraterrestrial intelligence is secretly watching us? And if so, why is it that we haven't found them yet? Anyway, on that note, that's all I wanted to mention in this video. It's a very unusual paper for me to talk about, but I thought it was pretty interesting. And in some of the future videos, we'll explore this idea a little bit more. But for now, that's it. Thank you for watching, I'll see you tomorrow, space out, and as always, bye bye.